With a year as strong as this, it's only harder for me to understand the continued hate for this genre.
No, your loss.
Today we are ranking some of the biggest metalcore albums of 2023, and we're starting with August Burns Red and Death Below. These guys are still one of the most consistent metalcore groups of the 2000s, and they continue to put out some of their best material today, some of their best musicianship still, and some solid guest appearances too from the classic era of metalcore, including Spencer Chamberlain of Under Oath and Jesse Leach of Killswitch Engage. An incredible mix of sing-along anthems, pit-worthy ragers, and progressive jaw-droppers with not a single dud to be found. This one is starting us off strong at Perfection. Then we have Currents with The Death We Seek. Now, I know this is one of the bigger modern metalcore bands out there right now, but I've personally just never been a big fan of them. Everything they do, I think that Make Them Suffer and Polaris just do better, and that includes this album. Just very generic and forgettable, with the last few tracks even venturing into modern Architects issues. There are a few heavier tracks that are decent, but don't expect this to in any way match the title or cover art. It is going to okay. Then we have Bury Tomorrow with The Seventh Son. Highly underrated UK metalcore band with their 7th album, and the first with new clean singer and keyboardist Tom Prendergast. Now, I think that Tom is bringing a whole new dynamic range to the band alongside Daniel's snarls, which are imposing as ever, especially on tracks like Heretic. Great riffs, awesome synths, and overall solid songwriting, bringing back some of that peak era Architects energy alternatively. And despite being around since the 2000s, I think this may be one of their best albums to date. I'm going to put it at great tier. And a little reminder, this is not an exhaustive list of every album I even listened to this year, but feel free to comment any additions down below along with your own favorites, and if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button. But up next we have Code Orange with The Above. Now, I know that there are people out there who don't care for the direction that this band has taken into nu metal and 90s alternative influences, but when there are so many top-shelf metallic hardcore bands, and we're going to get to them, just dropping serious albums too, it's kind of hard for me to be mad at these guys for experimenting with the sound of my youth, ultimately, with that kind of grungy and alternative attitude. Now, at the same time, when it comes to the actual execution, it's definitely messy. Another rare case where I mostly agreed with Fantano, who also generally loves this band like I do.
They failed to put any spin on it whatsoever, leaving many of these songs feeling like a random patchwork of clashing ideas.
I'd be interested to hear them better focus this sound in the future. I don't think it's terrible by any means. In fact, I love Mirror. I'm going to put it at good tier. Speaking of imposing hardcore, we have Jesus Peace with So Unknown. This is just bone-breaking brutality, very much following up what I loved about the debut. Some of these tracks, like Gates of Horn, legit make me feel like I'm going insane with just how heavy and chaotic they get. Pure mosh pit music. This one is going to fantastic.
I'm in danger!
Then we have Periphery with Periphery 5, Djent Is Not a Genre. Another album where responses were kind of mixed, but I continue to be impressed with every album that they put out. Even as someone who's been listening since album 1, they lean into their progressive side while also testing the limits of their aggression. Plenty of catchy choruses, Meshuggah-esque interludes, and even some smooth jazz. The experimentation can be a little bit hit or miss, but it's always welcome over just regurgitating the same formula over and over again. Not their best album, but still among my favorites this year, so it's actually going to perfection. Then there's the Amity Affliction with Not Without My Ghosts. Solid enough if extremely forgettable, kind of, again, Architect's approach to mixing soft and heavy. I like the atmosphere, but I think that, again, Make Them Suffer just does it better overall and with more engaging songs. Solid performances all around, the clean singing is great, and I love the cool synth line on Death and The Setting Sun. Even the bass gets some standout moments, like on Fade Away, but ultimately still, this one faded away from me and ended up at okay tier. Then there's Drain with Living Proof. Perfect for fans of Knocked Loose and crossover alike. Living Proof continuing to bring that classic 90s hardcore spirit that they brought on California Cursed. Nothing mind-blowing, but at a lean 26 minutes is pure attitude with plenty of headbanging and again mosh pit energy to get you two-stepping. I'm going to put this one at great tier. Next up is Sleepsculptor with Divine Recalibration. If you also enjoy modern mathcore groups like Carbomb, Frontier, and CU Space Cowboy, this is a must-listen. Easily one of the most noisy and chaotic records on this list with guitars that sound like they're being fed through a paper shredder. Also feeling a little bit of Psyopus, Sixth, and I Wrestled a Bear Once. Plenty of breakdowns, but with a lot of thought put into their placement and execution. Just check out Venerate if you're still on the fence. This one was at fantastic, but it kind of got bumped down, so it's like really high up on great tier. Then we have Johnny Booth with Moments Elsewhere.
We've been hidden for the truth was living ferocious for the moments living on.
Now, as someone who loves the likes of Loathe and Let Live, this seems like something that should be right up my alley, and I had so many requests for me to listen to it, and respect where it's due for a cool mix here of pummeling harsh segments with the more soaring melodic section, but for whatever reason, even after multiple listens, I just did not find myself connecting with this much at all. I can't really put my finger on it, but it just sort of is what it is, I guess. Maybe I'll change my mind on some future listens. Bright Future is definitely a standout for me, but this one landed at good.
How could you?
Then we have Spiritbox with the Fear of Fear EP.
Time is always here to catch my fall.
Frankly, I was kind of disappointed with this band's full length, so I'm actually glad to hear them back in this format, and I think that they nailed it. All three songs are fantastic, from the crushing Cellar Door to the more Deftonesy Jaded, and The Void also proving that they still have the proggy technical chops of bands like Animals as leaders. Including Rotoscope would have been a nice icing on the cake, but I still will take it as it is. It's also going pretty high up on great tier. Then there's Pupil Slicer with Blossom.
It's like you got now. Get down on your knees.
This band has been greatly expanding their sound from an already impressive display of bludgeoning mathcore to elements of alternative emo and post-rock. Dim Morning Light also has this like silky effects-soaked guitar riff straight off of a Deftones album, and I would say the same about some of the bass lines all over this thing. In some ways, I could compare their sound to Rollo Tomasi, but really Pupil Slicer are just doing their own thing, and I think that Blossom is easily their strongest testament to that fact to date. So this one was an early perfection tier for me. Then there's Avenged Sevenfold with Life is But a Dream.
Right in the shadows, wandering beyond the brain.
Talk about divisive. People waited a long time for this, so I get why they may have had some expectations, but personally, I was never a huge fan of these guys to begin with, so I didn't have a dog in the race. Personally, I found this album very interesting with all of its wild influences, seemingly from Bad Religion and Faith No More to Queen and Sgt. Pepper era The Beatles, maybe throwing some Dave Matthews Band and Frank Sinatra for a good measure. Much like Code Orange, though, the execution is very messy, and the vocals are pretty atrocious in places, like just awful. I'm sorry about that. So I almost wanted to put it higher because of its interesting factor, but it did land at okay. It's at like the top of okay. Then we have Chamber with A Love to Kill For. Longtime fans out there should know that I love me some hard-hitting mathcore with a 2000s vibe, and this is definitely that album. As much as I enjoyed Cost of Sacrifice, I think that A Love to Kill For is even stronger. Shifting rhythms, chaotic riffs, vitriolic vocals, conjuring classic spirit of botch. Yeah, this one is going to fantastic. Next up is Ringworm with Seeing Through Fire. Easily the most underrated band here. Formed in Cleveland in 1989, Ringworm, alongside the likes of Converge and Integrity, helped to kickstart the new movement out of the hardcore scene that basically became metalcore. And now 3 decades and 9 albums later, they're still dropping some of their most intense work, in my opinion. Just pure angst, set ablaze, angry, D-beat-driven music that still holds true to their 90s roots while being heavier than ever. So this one is going to perfection. Then there's Eyes with Congratulations. Copenhagen once more delivering the goods. Underperformer was a surprise banger in 2020, and they only step up the abrasive violence with this follow-up, combining elements of Converge, The Armed, and Jesus Lizard for some truly sardonic rebellion. It's just that it's hard for its more straightforward sound to kind of compete on this list, but well worth your time. I'm going to put it up on good tier. Then, speaking of Polaris, we have Polaris with Fatalism. Now, as a huge fan of this band and someone who has heralded them as one of the top 5 metalcore bands of the modern era, it pains me to say that I did not love this album. I absolutely adored The Death of Me, but this just feels like it's falling into some of the crappier tropes that have been plaguing. Again, I hate to keep using them as a punching bag, but Architects, what they've been doing for the last few years. Very few of these songs really stick with me. There are some great moments, but for the most part, it just feels like another generic, interchangeable, modern metalcore album that I'll completely forget about in a month. In fact, as I'm thinking about it now, I don't remember a single thing. Rip in respect to Ryan Sue, though. Too many talented young guitarists going out way too soon. But this album, it's just going to okay tier. Then there's End with the Sin of Human Frailty. The return of this ravaging supergroup featuring current and ex-members of Fit for an Autopsy, Counterpart, Shai Hulud, Reign Supreme, and more. 31 minutes of wall-to-wall D-beat headbanging and pulverizing breakdowns, totally on par with the debut. I also love the features from J.R. Hayes of Pig Destroyer and Dylan Walker of Full of Hell. Just gnarly stuff. It feels like the perfect midpoint between Harm's Way and Converge, but with some cool industrialized moments too, like Thaw, that I would love to hear more of in the future. This one's going to fantastic. Then we have Creak with Depth Perception. Pretty impressive for a debut album, and I can see why Prosthetic Records already snatched them up. It's an interesting listen, weaving in elements of mathcore, noise, and post-hardcore on tracks like Doomed and Restless Dreams. This one definitely takes familiar components, but puts them together in a unique way that stuck with me. Maybe some Loathe comparisons here. It just feels a little bit half-baked overall, which is why it landed at good tier. Then we have Mouthbreather with Self-Test. One of the hardest young metalcore crews around that hardly anyone knows about, and I'm going to continue to shout their name from the rooftops until they pick up some momentum. Just truly brain-melting noisy guitars and bass alongside a dual vocal attack that is completely unhinged. Ethical Hunting is easily one of the most hype album openers and even really songs of the year, and I'm also partial to Imaginary Skin, Shotgun Funeral, and Soulmate. Hardcore for the criminally insane is how I put it. It is going to perfection. Then we have Vexed with Negative Energy. This band's sound is a mix of progressive deathcore and metalcore with djenty guitars and showcasing both thunderously low death growls and powerful cleans from frontwoman Megan Target. I also appreciate the overall concept here around mental health. Good stuff, but a little inconsistent. I think overall I found Culling Culture to be a little bit stronger and more memorable, but I really dig their style and I'm looking forward to hear more. This one is going to great tier. Then there is Better Lovers with God Made Me an Animal. Two of my favorite bands here going all the way back to high school, colliding with members of Every Time I Die and Greg Puciato of the Dillinger Escape Plan, along with Will Putney of Fit for an Autopsy for good measure. And while I'm still a little bit sad at the prospect that we'll never get another record from either of these bands, this collaboration in many ways offers the best of both worlds. The instrumentation carries forward that unmistakable trademark fusion of mathcore and dirtbag southern rock, while Greg both rages and croons like it's still the 2010s. The only reason this one's not higher is its length, so I'm putting it at great tier, but again, I'm thinking pretty high up. Then there's Veil of Maya with Mother. I really enjoyed the last two albums from this band, but this was definitely a disappointment for me overall. It's got a few jams like Synthwave Vegan, Tokyo Chainsaw, Lost Creator, and Death Runner, but outside of that, it feels disjointed, at times boring, and something about the production just feels off. I wish they had released the album they had scrapped before this, because those singles sounded way better to me. This one ended up at okay tier. But then we have Harm's Way with Common Suffering. Another Punisher of an album, 5 years in the wake, left by the fantastic Posthuman, and this Chicago band is still constantly redefining heavy with every song, two-stepping their way through some truly pummeling territory, but also getting raw and wicked in the vein of 90s era Helmet on tracks like Hollow Cry, which was definitely one of my favorite tracks on the album. And then they can also get crushing from a more atmospheric angle with tracks like the industrialized Terrorizer and especially Undertow featuring guest vocals from King Woman. This one is going to fantastic. It's like right alongside End. Very, very close, those two albums. Then we have Under Oath with The Wretched, The Ruinous. As someone who hasn't been interested in this band really since the 2000s, it really shocked me just how good this album is. Like, seriously, I can't believe how long some of these riffs go on at the speed that they do, and solid dynamics too, jumping between everything from the thrashier Dawn of the Militant to the more melodic stuff. Definitely one of their best albums to date, like just really strong even from these legacy acts. It is going to fantastic. Then we have Capra with Airs. I've been really enjoying this Louisiana hardcore band ever since they dropped Torture Ship about 3 years ago, leading up to their awesome debut LP In Transmission. And with Airs, I think they continue to deliver on both heartstring-pulling lyrics and Every Time I Die inspired riffage, not to mention some guest vocals here from Walls of Jericho's Candace Cooksulane. Crow continues to channel the darkest corners of human experience with a passionate delivery that feels almost improvised. It feels a little bit slower than In Transmission, but Tyler's riffs and Jeremy's drumming hit just as hard. This one ended up pretty high on good tier. Then there's Zulu with A New Tomorrow. I've only just recently gotten into these guys. It's a Los Angeles hardcore project, and they definitely have my full attention, balancing both reverence and palpable anger regarding their shared cultural history, and all of that very much coming through in just headbanging, mosh pit, metallic hardcore. Very interesting how they weave in Motown, jazz, and other culturally relevant music between the explosions of distortion. I'd love to see them only further integrate this element, though, moving forwards, because it can feel a little bit disjointed. I don't love it start to finish, but I am dying to hear more. So I'm going to put this one at great tier, which makes me realize I actually put something here that did not belong, and you know what? It's Drain, actually. Drain was actually, I'm going to move it down kind of near Capra, high up on good. Then we have Of Mice and Men with Tether. Now, personally, I've always found this band to be pretty C-string, especially when it comes to metalcore bands formed in the 2000s. They were definitely late to that wave and didn't do anything new that other bands hadn't already done better, in my opinion. Their albums are decent enough, but this new one, once again, just falls short of doing anything I'll remember a few weeks from now. And again, thinking of it, I don't remember a single thing about this album, even though I didn't listen to it that long ago. So it is going to okay tier. Then we have Mouth for War with Bleed Yourself. Now, just when I thought I'd heard all of the best new metallic hardcore bands out there, this Colorado quintet found their way into my inbox, and it's just their second LP, but already they're about as brutal as the genre can get. Just absolute violence coming through, especially in the vocals. We've gotten some real crushers this year, as you can see on this list, but honestly, this is right up there on the same level with their more established peers, and I'm sure that I will be adding them to my list of bands to watch. If I see that name come up again, that is an instant download and listen for me. So they are going way high up on fantastic, right alongside the likes of End, Harm's Way, and Jesus Peace. And then we have the Callous Dowboys with God Smiles Upon the Callous Dowboys.
When I see a star river, such history,
The masters of genre melding, with pushing the pink envelope alone representing quite the gauntlet of styles from the Dillinger Escape Plan to sparkly synths and pulsating electronic beats. Then there's the sort of Glassjaw and Let Live meets the number 12 Looks Like You, Waco Jesus, and then designer Shroud of Turin throws in some seriously chaotic saxophone and a touch of flamenco. Seriously, this band outdoes itself every time and continues to prove that they are the heirs to the now largely vacant metalcore throne, even with just these 3 songs. They are going way up on perfection. Y'all check out this playlist for more metalcore related videos, or this one for other videos just like this where I'm ranking different albums from a specific genre from 2023. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.